to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Traci Scherck, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Engagement. What exactly is employee engagement? And when we look at engagement is essentially an agreement to do something or go somewhere at a fixed time, right? That is the definition of engagement. And when we look at employee engagement is about our employees agreeing to be involved in, and I like to say woven into, the tapestry of the organization, right? And so welcome to Talent Optimization. My name is Traci Scherck, and I am the Chief Talent Officer here at Elevated Talent Consulting. And today we're going to be talking about employee engagement. How do we know if individuals are engaged? And when we look at engagement, we're also going to take a strong look at performance and how does performance impact the level of engagement, and how does performance impact individuals' thoughts about what they're doing inside of an organization. And that really brings us to what tools do we have to take a look at what's going well, what's not going well. In many organizations, we have key metrics that we're looking at. The biggest metric that we have is what are those organizational results that we're looking to hit by the end of the year or the end of the quarter, right? These are typically revenue numbers. These are typically sales numbers. There's a number of key items here. These could be production numbers. These could be development numbers, developing new programs, et cetera. So when we look at what are those organizational goals, and are we meeting them or not? There's a lot of factors that go into that. Some are processes, some are employee focused, right? But guess what? Every business problem is a people problem. And we like to diagnose what's specifically happening in our organization and how that leads back to how engaged our employees are and where specifically those key potential issues and bright spots are. So often when we think of diagnosing, we're just thinking of the negative. But so often when we diagnose, we're also finding all the things that are right and good. And guess what? We want to celebrate those amazing things that are going well. So what's the definition of diagnose, according to Merriam, right? It is identify the nature by examining the symptoms. So when we conduct pulse checks inside of our organization, or when we conduct specifically employee engagement surveys, really what we're doing is we're figuring out what are the symptoms that are happening based on individuals' feelings, based on their perception of what's specifically going on. And I want to start today talking about a story. And this actually comes from a Harvard Business Review article called Employee Surveys Are Still One of the Best Ways to Measure Engagement, right? And what this is specifically looking at is what happened at Facebook. And what we know is that surveys are an amazing predictor of behavior because by simply asking the question, it tells individuals that you're curious and that you're listening, or at least we hope you are, right? We don't want to ever do a survey with no intention of follow-up because that can do more harm than good. But what surveys do is they give employees a chance to feel heard, and it allows us to know what's specifically going on. And here's what Facebook found. They found that people who don't fill out either of their 2 annual surveys are 2.6 times more likely to leave the organization in 6 months. That's pretty telling. Just knowing who's taking the survey tells us their engagement. That right there tells you so much. Are they engaged or not because they're taking the survey or not? Now, granted, there are at times other things that go into a survey. I will say with my clients, I've had organizations where there's a lack of trust in leadership and a fear of retaliation from taking the survey. So as Elevated Talent Consulting, we went in and as a third party, we were the ones who conducted those surveys and then shared information back with those organizations anonymously, right? So again, you need to understand what's the context, but that specific number of those who did not take the survey were 2.6 times more likely to leave the organization in 6 months. It's pretty significant. And here's the other thing. Knowing that an organization is not going to adopt every idea an employee comes up with on the survey, but when we do surveys, we want to be able to communicate afterwards. Here's what we heard. You know what? We may need to do a little bit more, and let's do some staff chats. Let's do some fireside chats. Let's do some things to really gain some more information and determine what's really happening with this. And then from there, we can start to make some of those key decisions. Now, again, surveys are an amazing vehicle for changing behavior. And when we ask individuals what their input or insights are, just that question of, hey, what's going on? What's an insight that you have? That increases their likelihood that they're going to do that thing. So for example, this is another example from Facebook. They asked individuals if they would like to volunteer 3 hours for the American Cancer Society. Volunteering rates spiked from 4% to 31%. So for my nonprofit organizations listening in, note that, hey, if we ask our folks, would you like to volunteer for the American Red Cross or American Cancer Society or a local, nonprofit organization like a Can Do Industries, which serves individuals with developmental disabilities, just by asking those questions, it puts it on their radar, right? So we want to make sure that we're really being careful and insightful about those questions that we're asking, because when we're diagnosing organizational change, the way we ask those questions will impact the thoughts about that on the back end of that. And then the other thing that I think is really important, and this is one other example from Facebook, I promise my last one of today. What they did in their survey is they asked 30% of employees whether or not they were personally committed to improving their experience working here. Guess what? Just by asking that question, they ended up being 12% more likely than their peers to request to curate a list of additional resources and tools to help them become more engaged in the work environment. And that was true whether the answer was yes or no. So when we're looking at the kind of engagement we have inside of our organizations, how are we finding out if they're engaged or not? Surveys are a great tool for that. And we can do surveys in several different ways. We can do pulse check surveys. There's some great ones out there like Tiny Pulse that will allow you to do quick pulse checks of 2 or 3 questions. And guess what? You can create these yourself by using systems like Typeform or even the polls inside of your Outlook, right, to track these. But when we engage with our employees, we tell them that we're listening. And right now, as of this recording, we're in the middle of the Great Resignation, right? Where we have so many staff inside of our organizations really looking to leave the organization because they haven't been happy with how things have gone over the last 18 months through COVID. So with that, we really need to pay attention to what do our employees need and want? And are we asking the questions to garner and gain that feedback? And so as we look at this, there's a couple things that we really want to pay attention to. So how do you know what is going well and what is not going well as you align your business strategy to your business results? So again, what is the purpose of your surveys? And does that purpose lead to meeting the business results for your organization? And so there's 3 really activities that go into this. And so what we look at is hey, are we measuring what matters? And then are we analyzing the evidence? And then are we prescribing improvement actions? And so as we just talked about in our opening story with Facebook, is they're measuring what matters based on the questions that they're asking. And inside of your organization, you do want to measure what matters. Now, there's several surveys out there that have dug in to figure out what does matter inside of organizations as far as engagement. And there's significant numbers of benchmarks assigned to that so that we can see what those key things are. And that's always a positive to know, hey, how are we benchmarking against other organizations, right? And whenever we're diagnosing what's going on inside the organization, we want to celebrate our wins. We also want to see where are the biggest low-hanging fruit that we can address right away to start to gain momentum. And guess what? That helps us gain trust. That helps us to see where specific items are missing or gaining inside of the organization. So measuring what matters also includes that we have the right variables that we're looking at. When we're looking at employee engagement, one of the key things that we always want to look at is performance. What is an employee's performance and how does that impact their survey results, right? Because what this tells us is if they are great performers, are they also engaged in the work? Or are they engaged in the work, but they're not great performers, right? So when you're doing employee engagement surveys, a great tip that we have is do include in those data points what type of performer they are. You can pull that from their previous performance review score in order to do that. And when you're looking at that, you really want to pay attention. And let me give you an example of why. So we at Elevated Talent Consulting are a certified partner with Predictive Index. And Predictive Index did surveys of their employees. And one of the surveys that they do is they, do these employee engagement surveys, they do exit surveys, but they also look at things like on Glassdoor and whatnot. And one of the things that they found in their employee engagement surveys is employees were stating, hey, you move way too fast. The organization moves way too fast. It's way too quick. And it's something that we don't like. And what they did is they dug into those numbers to say, okay, so if we believe that we're moving too fast, great. Who's saying that? Are those our high performers saying that we're moving too fast? Or are those our low performers stating that we're moving too fast? Because when they could dig into that, what they found is that it was the low performers stating that they moved too fast. And the further they dug into that data, they found that their high performers were actually stating that they weren't moving fast enough. And if you want to hear this story from Mike Zani, the CEO of the Predictive Index, go back a couple podcasts and you can actually hear his story and his insights about how you create great dream teams inside of organizations. So with that, as we're diagnosing those organizational changes, we want to pay attention to what are those other factors that are impacting these insights. Because again, when we measure what matters and we analyze the evidence can mean several different things based on the context of what we're looking through. So we want to make sure we're looking through the right context. And then we want to prescribe improvement actions. So when we look at prescribing improvement actions, we're essentially looking at that and saying, hey, what can we do to make these things better? And when we do make these things better, how does that impact the rest of the organization? And so McKinsey & Company comes out with some amazing case studies, and they have a case study about linking employee engagement to customer satisfaction at Starwood. So Starwood is a hotel and resort, which is worldwide. And what they have found is a new CEO went into Starwood and they were looking at what was happening. And they wanted to find that link between the HR function inside of the organization and a terrific customer experience. And what they found was increased collaboration between departments in the hotel, self-reported by employees, was very predictive of reduction in customer complaints and associated increase in occupancy rates. So essentially, they intuitively knew that employees' attitudes had a massive impact on client satisfaction. And what they went out to do was to find the real data on that. So what they did is they started to help people work together to make people's jobs easier. And with that, they came up with new communication devices so that they could communicate in real time. They encouraged people to take on appropriate level of autonomy in their jobs, to diversify the skills they use to do their jobs and to make it more engaging. And they aimed to offer an immediate feedback loop to show the efforts were producing results. And again, these feedback loops are so incredibly important. If you listen back for episodes where we talk about leadership and accountability, guess what? Feedback that happens in the moment will foster change if change is needed. And it's also going to say, guess what? You're doing a good job. Keep doing it. Because when we go to make change, if we aren't given some sort of reinforcement, we're going to fall back into those old ways. So often what we see with our clients in our diagnostic surveys or employee engagement surveys is, here's the things going well. Keep doing it. That's amazing. And you know what? Here's some things that might need just some really small tweaks. So when we look at what those success factors are, here's what they found at Starwood. They found that there was very strong alignment with the support of the CEO. Second is a robust partnership between HR and guest intelligence and marketing teams created a commitment to continuously show the value that the customer-centric approach creates. Third, they aligned the incentives of their general managers and their leadership team, because what that did is that gave them the information, the data, and data is really important here for them to be able to create a reward structure. And finally, the data was able to show measurable results along the way that helped to change the culture. So when we look at these items, and really look at, hey, as we're looking at our employee engagement surveys and diagnosing, again, we want to measure what matters. And what matters is, what are those business results that we're looking to get for our organization? We want to analyze the evidence and ensure that we're looking at the key pieces. What are the drivers that go into that evidence? And then we want to prescribe improvement actions. Transparency is key in these conversations. We want to use data so that it's not individuals' opinions, but it's true data of, hey, this led to this, which led to this, which led to this. And that is going to allow us to get our key business results inside of our organizations. So with that, thank you so much for joining us on our Talent Optimization podcast. And before we go, again, we always have one key takeaway for HR. And our key takeaway for HR is, when you're diagnosing your teams, make sure you understand what your executive leadership team is really looking for, so that you can really align yourself with what's important to the executive leadership team. And you really need to listen in to what are your employees saying, because so often you are that person inside of your organization that is analyzing the evidence. So when you're analyzing the evidence, get really curious. What am I missing here? That's a beautiful question. And if Predictive Index hadn't asked that question, they would have thought we move too fast as an organization. What am I missing here? Led them to say, I wonder the differentiation that an individual's performance has on how they answered this question, right? So we want to make sure that we're paying close attention to that. Again, the key question is, what am I missing here? What else is here that I can't see from where I sit? This is going to open up an amazing world for you to grab insights and to truly collaborate with your leadership team. Now, what's one key takeaway for our executives? Guess what? What you measure gets done. And are you measuring the right things with data to get to your business results? If not, you need to take another closer look at the diagnostic surveys that you're doing, whether that's a pulse survey or an exit survey or employee engagement survey, or even your customer engagement survey, so that you can tie these dots together and really get to, how do we prescribe the actions that need to happen in order to get the key things done inside of our organization. So with that, thank you so much for joining us. And if you are looking for more and really, digging into additional tips and tricks and actual kind of layout of how do you do this inside your organization, join our Talent Optimization Foundation membership program, where every Monday at 1:00 Central, we will either do an office hours or bring on a guest to talk about a key issue and how you can implement that inside your organization. Oh, and if you are SHRM certified, guess what? We have PDCs for those as well. Thank you so much. And I hope that you have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.